Seed oils are the root cause of literally every chronic disease.
Today, we're joined by Dr. Cate Shanahan, physician and author of Dark Calories. A leading voice on nutrition, she reveals how vegetable oils impact our health and how to reclaim it.
What made you pick this topic?
I picked this topic because it is the most important topic. Pathologists have found and identified it as the root cause of literally every single disease. We're talking about the A to Z. You have to be paranoid because the whole world is trying to feed you these oils in one form or another. By the time you're eating a French fry, you're eating the equivalent toxicity of smoking a cigarette. One French fry equals one cigarette. Seed oils accelerate the aging process. That's why I call them. There's no amount of vitamins or supplements that can control the damage done.
If I stopped today, how long do you think it would probably take for my body to be clear of this nasty stuff?
Yeah, so
Dr. Cate Shanahan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Tim. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
Thanks for coming. I mean, I have been a massive fan of your work for a very long time. And as I said to you just before we started recording, there's your expertise and your books have been recommended by, the biggest names in this space, many colleagues, friends, attendees of the shows, everything. And it's like, I remember everything came back to your earlier book, Deep Nutrition, so many times. It's just like, I've heard this so many times that I'm going to have to read this. And then when I saw your most recent book come out, which is Dark Calories, and obviously the book cover image caught my attention because of the whole, seed oil thing. I'm very happy to have you on the show because I feel like I know your work and a lot about you. So this is going to be an exciting ride.
Yay. That we're in the middle, in America here, we're kind of in the middle of this whole Make America Healthy Again movement. Everything they're talking about is straight out of Deep Nutrition. And so I'm kind of, I guess, proud of that because my goal actually many years ago was to take down the vegetable oil industry, which now we're using the term seed oil, but that's what I was after is canola, and I was coming for canola, and now I feel like they're on the run. So that's really exciting. So
just want to state to the listeners, and I know guys, the listening in, we talk about some interesting, weird, and sometimes some, let's say, against traditional mindset or some wacky things. And today's episode will be a little bit controversial, although the ridiculousness of it is it shouldn't be. And I think you're going to find out why. So tell me, what kind of damages are seed oils doing to our bodies?
Seed oils are the root cause of literally every chronic disease. They're the main driver because seed oils promote this state of cellular disorganization and dysfunction called oxidative stress, which pathologists have found and identified as the root cause of literally every single disease. We're talking about the A to Z, from Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, obesity, fatty liver, psoriasis. I can't think of a Z, but there's a ton of, literally everything is related to oxidative stress. And the seed oils, what I call the hateful eight, they promote the vast majority of oxidative stress that people eating the typical, what I call a standard American diet, but I guess you must have a different name for it over there in the UK. But people who aren't intentionally avoiding the seed oils are at risk for literally every disease because of oxidative stress.
So before we get into the whole seed oil thing in more detail, I just want to ask you, why do you think Deep Nutrition has been endorsed by so many big names? Like obviously Dr. Joseph McCullough, Megyn Kelly, and even NBA legends like Dwight Howard and Kobe Bryant. It's a pretty good recommendations.
Yes, I'm honored that it has been truly. I put it out there and I had no idea how it was going to be received. But it may just be because it's simply the truth. And I'm not promoting any kind of product. I'm not promoting any specific diet even. I just sought the truth. And it turns out that like the scientific truth and like, for lack of a better word, like the spiritual truths, like the things that we know in our bones actually align. And you know what I mean? Or maybe you don't know what I mean, but I think that's why it's so powerful. The message is so powerful because things like in deep nutrition, we just say things like, well, it's better to raise animals that are healthy and animals that like have a better life are just better. Like it's better to do that, right? They're better. Their flesh is more nutritious for our flesh, right? So it's like this transcendental concept of looking at the condition, like the emotion. How do you feel when you look at a farm, right? If you look at a CAFO and see all those, you know, those cows standing in their own feces in a feedlot, you don't get the same feeling when you drive through an idyllic countryside where you've got the cows grazing on grass and all like the birds chirping and the beauty happening. Well, it turns out that the science says that what we like better aesthetically and emotionally, actually our cells like better chemically and biophysiologically. And I think that's a profoundly important concept.
It made me think back to the time that I was out in the Bavarian Alps with a friend of mine, and we were walking along, you know, just a country path, and then there's hundreds of cows, all with their bells, walking around like free roaming, just like we had a vegan with us. But I said, wow, that looks delicious. And I'm so, you know, it's great that they're having an amazing life. And it's also great that they will taste fantastic too. So I've mentioned your book, Dark Calories, okay? And it explains why vegetable oils are destroying our health. I mean, I would say literally destroying our health. What made you pick this topic? And why hasn't mainstream media picked up on why it's so important yet?
Yeah, so I picked this topic because it is the most important topic. And the answer to the second question is why it's the most important topic. Mainstream media hasn't picked up on it because we were lied to about these oils so many years ago, 70 years ago. We were lied to by our health authorities, and mainstream media believes the health authorities to this day, and they're clueless about the lie. Today's health authorities are possibly clueless about the lie themselves, but certainly as a medical doctor going through medical school, I was clueless about the lie. And I know that dietitians are too. And in America, we call the health professionals whose job it is to understand what a healthy diet looks like, we call them dietitians. I don't know, maybe you have a different term there, like nutritionists or something. But here they're dietitians. They are the licensed health practitioners that doctors actually outsource all of that to. Like doctors don't generally bother or have the time to talk to their patients about diet. So we refer to dietitians. But dietitians, just like medical doctors and just like the vast majority of the American population, believe this lie that these oils, seed oils, the Hateful Eight, are the heart healthy oils, and that we need to avoid the traditional fats that are high in saturated fat. And both of those statements I just said are the lie, right? They're related to each other. That's why I call it the lie. But it was never true. It was just started, the American Heart Association put forth this idea with zero evidence. And I need the world needs to understand that so that we can heal from the damage that we are currently experiencing due to the seed oils.
Well, it's actually quite crazy because when you look at some of the stats, and obviously I've been through your book quite a lot and also done a fair bit of research behind this seed oils thing myself. There's been an explosion in seed oil use. Back in 1900, Americans consumed almost 0% seed oils or vegetable oils, depending on which marketing label you want to use. By 2000, they made up 30 to 40% of the average caloric intake. 30 to 40%. It just, and yet there's influencers, and I say influencers, some of them medically trained, some of them not, saying, well, seed oils are fine, you're paranoid, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. I mean, one of the exciting things that you touched on a few minutes ago was about, you know, the people in charge don't really realize that seed oils were such a priority to fix. But recently, RFK talked about replacing seed oils. And I think I've seen a few memes going around Instagram talking about RFK swapping out seed oils at McDonald's with tallow. So, I mean, if Maha is partly based on deep nutrition, and then RFK is talking about seed oils going and tallow coming in, do you think it's likely to happen?
I think that they're taking that initiative. They're taking it seriously. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, though, because our entire food system is oriented around soy and canola production in this country, primarily. Those are the two main seed oil crops. And in order to get rid of those in the food supply, we have to replace them. And those kind of supply chains have not been created. And so that's the challenge. But you know what, Tim, is the whole reason we're eating soy and canola in the amount that we are is because we were growing it. And, you know, this goes back to the history of the stuff and why the lye needed to be created in the first place. But the point is, and how this ties to your question, is that this has been a push economy. We were producing this stuff and now we're producing more. Like, back in let's say go through like the increase, you know, in consumption, like you said, practically zero in 1900. It didn't really exist. I mean, it's an industrial oil. It did not exist at all before the 1880s. We couldn't have produced it. Didn't have the technology, didn't have the industry in place. So, the production was, people would eat maybe in a yearly basis, maybe a couple of ounces, right, on average. And then by 1920s, 1930s, that was maybe like a half a pound. But during World War II, the production of it amped up in America and in Canada. That was because we needed those oils for the war effort, not just to feed the soldiers, primarily to feed the machines. So the production of this stuff has always driven the consumption, and these supply chains that we have now go back many generations. So to change that out to what we were doing more like 150 years ago, that's the challenge. I mean, the reason we're doing what we're doing is because of the supply chains, right? So unless we fix those supply chains, nothing will change.
When I read the book, Dark Calories, one of the opening chapters, I think it was, mentioned about how inflammation and how oxidants worked, and how seed oil was probably the biggest pro-oxidant thing that there is. And in fact, when I saw the chemical structures on it, and it doesn't go too deep, but it goes deep enough for, I think, you know, for early learners and, you know, more advanced medical people. So it works very well. So don't get overwhelmed by hearing it goes into chemical structures and things like that. If you're listening, I actually stopped and had to take a breath and was like, crap. Like, this is even more important than I thought it was. And, you know, rewind 3 years ago, I was out having dinner with a friend of mine who is, you know, I would say quite paranoid with his health to some extent. And we were having rice with butter in it. And he said, I think this is margarine. And I was like, no, dude, it tastes like butter. He's like, no, it tastes like margarine. And he was freaking out. I think this is margarine in my rice. I can't be having this. I can't be having this. And he asked the waiter, and the waiter said, no, it's butter. He said, I want you to bring me the packet so I can see it is butter, because I don't believe it. And he was so paranoid. And I just remember thinking, crikey, why is he so worried about it? I mean, I avoid seed oils, but man, that's a bit extreme. And anyway, when I read the book, I was just like, he was right. He was right.
Well, how does it end? Was it butter?
It was butter. Yeah, it was butter.
Oh, good. Okay. So he was just being paranoid. But yes, you do have to be paranoid because the whole world is trying to feed you these oils in one form or another. You know, nowadays, the main form that we get them is the liquid form, as opposed to maybe 20 years ago, a lot of the calories we get were actually solidified by the process of hydrogenation. You get trans fats out of that. But those are less harmful to our health. Those trans fats, as bad as they are, and this is a point that I want everybody to understand, that as bad as we understand that trans fats and hydrogenated oils are, the liquid oils are worse, especially if we cook with them. And that has to do with oxidation and inflammation. And the chemistry of this stuff that I go into in Dark Calories, and we can touch on, the chemistry is beyond what dietitians understand, beyond what doctors understand, and beyond what these people supposedly debunking the idea that seed oils are healthy understand. Most of the experts, they simply lack the breadth and depth of scientific knowledge to even call themselves experts on this particular topic, because it is very chemistry oriented and very deep scientific, deep, microscopic level of understanding of how the body operates. And unless you obsess about that, like I have done for over 20, almost 30 years now,
wow,
starting with my training at, before even medical school, unless you obsess over that and become like a cell whisperer, that's kind of how I describe myself. I think of what the cell would want, what the cell, what does the cell need? How's the cell feel on this diet? And unless somebody does that, they're not going to understand how bad these oils are and just how they drive disease. And literally every chronic disease is made worse by inflammation and involves some degree of inflammation. Chronic diseases, right? We want to distinguish that from, infectious disease, which, seed oils do make the inflammation from that worse as well. But that's different processes, right? We can recover more quickly from these acute illnesses, but the chronic illnesses, we cannot recover from them while we're still eating seed oils, period.
When I share some content online out about seed oils and people say, you don't know what you're talking about, there's nothing wrong with it, you're not an expert. And I just say, read this book and then we can have a conversation, right? Perfect. And when they say, no, I don't need to read this book to know, it's like, okay, basically they are clinging to an opinion that isn't science-based just because they have that opinion and they want to fight for that opinion instead of actually trying to get nearer to the truth. And even if they went the opposite way and said, actually, no, we still don't think there's anything wrong with it after reading the book, it shows that they have an open mind to growth. So whenever I do that and they decline, I'm like, conversation over. That's it.
You're so right. It's like they are afraid to go there. I've engaged on Twitter with this, or X now. I've engaged on social media with so many people who are attacking me. And I say, well, have you read my books? And they're asking, they're asking me for to explain why, show them the evidence on Twitter, on a social media platform that used to be limited to 140 characters. That's absurd. And, even just the suggestion of that shows a lack of willingness to go deep enough to understand this concept. But it's like they've got blinders on and they're literally afraid to have to think in a different way. That's what I feel like engaging with these people, that they're fanatics.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet, the irony is that they would call us fanatics for being so stuck into one area. But this is actually really funny because you're talking about, inflammation and oxidation and cellular health. So I just want to share something that came up for me recently, and it's highly relevant. So there's a technology, one of our vendors from our Health Optimization Summit in Austin happening in April next year. Just a cheeky little plug in the middle of the episode. But there's a technology, and it is to test your ESR, blood inflammation levels, and you can do a finger prick test, and you put it on a pipette thing, put it into a device. It reads the sedentary rate and gives you a report on email immediately, and it takes 30 minutes for it to work. The guy that invented it, he's a mega brain, and he's a lovely human actually. He said, "Oh yeah, my inflammation levels sit at this amount," and I was like, Are you grounding much, or are you having much seed oils? And he said, no, I'm not grounding. Tell me about it. I said, well, the interesting thing is obviously for inflammation in terms of antioxidant, grounding is one of the things that is up there. And pro-oxidant obviously is seed oils, which helps it. So I said to him, do us a favor, test yourself and see that it's in line with your usual levels and then go and do some grounding. Anyway, he responded to me like a week later and said, Tim, I've done 2 sessions of grounding and my ESR is the lowest it's ever been. Now, I didn't ask him about seed oils, which I should have done in prep for this podcast, to be completely honest. But the point is, it just shows how, I think if you're putting petrol on the fire and you're not quashing it at the same time, I mean, I think you could really, really do very well, especially if you measure it in real time with something like this. And then on the cellular health element, one of the supplement that I take ongoing pretty much since 2016, I think it was PC, phospholipids, by Body Bio. And this isn't a plug, by the way. I just love that stuff. And that's when I looked at Patricia Kane's work, which was the cell membrane and what things do different things to the cell membrane. And one of the things that I'm just kind of like thinking about as you're saying this is the fats, the fatty acids that we have in our diet help make up our cell membrane. Now, if they're made up of crappy seed oils that have been heated to ridiculous temperatures and been used hexane to process them, what are our cell membranes made up of?
Well, our cell membranes, it depends what cell membrane you are talking about. So the body's really complicated, right? And so the body tries to regulate the composition of the phospholipids as much as it can, because nature has certain, rules that it needs to follow. And one of the reasons that the seed oils containing omega-6 and omega-3, although lesser amounts of omega-3, one of the reasons that dietitians say that they're healthy is because our bodies cannot manufacture those fatty acids. And we do indeed need them for our cell membranes to function normally. It has to do with just like whether they're fluid enough or not, and whether or not the transporters that are trying to import things like potassium in our nervous system, potassium and the calcium and sodium transporters that help us transmit nerves. Like these basic physical structures in our cells must be made out of certain ingredients. And the omega-6 and the omega-3 that, yes, they're in seed oils, but they're also in seeds and many other foods. Those are part of the ingredients of making a cell. And in our tissue, like our brain, they're absolutely regulated, right? So if we have enough omega-3 in our diet, then we will have the optimal brain composition, right? As long as we have enough omega-6 and omega-3 and enough nutrition in our diet, we will have the optimal brain composition. Even if we eat a lot of omega-6, we can eat insane amounts of omega-6 and we will still have the optimal ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 in our brain as long as our diet is otherwise healthy. And that's the missing point. So maybe we need to talk about that. But as long as our diet is otherwise healthy, our body can regulate this stuff in the ideal operating parameters.
Hey guys, if you haven't heard, the Paleo Revival is here. This April in Austin, Texas, the tribe is getting back together again at the Health Optimization Summit. Learn how 35 industry legends like Gary Brecker, Mark Sisson, Ben Greenfield, JJ Virgin, and more optimize their health and how you can too. Spend the weekend surrounded by ancestral wisdom, exploring cutting-edge health tech, and connecting with a tribe that makes you feel, like family. Austin, this is long overdue, but the wait is finally over. Get your ticket today at hosummit.com/Austin. So I heard that a single dose, or should I say a single serving rather, of French fries cooked in vegetable oil, delivers the same toxicity of smoking 24 cigarettes. If that's the case, how can they be compared?
Yes, you read that in Dark Calories, and a lot of people have kind of picked that up, and it's a meme now because it's so shocking. So the way I got that was it was straight out of a publication by a world-renowned toxicologist who uses a machine, a very expensive, multi-million-dollar machine that can detect the molecular fingerprints of a wide variety of different molecules all at once. And why does that matter? Is because when the vegetable oils oxidize, when we cook with them, they oxidize. the fatty acids kind of explode into a million different fragments. And so to understand what is in what we are eating, you need a toxin detector that can detect thousands of different toxins at once. And so it's a very expensive machine, but that's how we did it. It's called an NMR machine, and it has to do with nuclear magnetic resonance, somewhat similar to the MRI machine kind of technology, but much more sophisticated. And you can get the molecular fingerprint of those exploded linoleic acid, and that's the omega-6, and the omega-3 fatty acid is called linolenic acid. Those are the two main polyunsaturated fatty acids that are in seed oils, right? So those are the explosive fatty acids, and we need to think of them as essential to our health, but explosive. So they must be treated like explosive material. We can't be sending them through these giant factories and crushing the seeds without regard to what's the chemistry of what's happening in there, and the heat and the reaction with oxidation and enzymes and metals. It's just a mess. And so in the end, what you get is an oil when it comes out of the factory that contains toxins. And then the bottles are like toxin multiplication machines, because the small amount of toxins that are in the bottles as the bottles exit the factory, they are self-multiplying, because you kind of started a chain reaction by making this mess of these seed oils and removing very important stabilizing antioxidants and vitamins. There's no antioxidants, hardly any, no vitamins, not enough to stabilize this initial reaction that got started in the factory that is kind of like a slow motion explosion, creating more and more toxins over time. So by the time you're eating a French fry, you're eating the equivalent toxicity of smoking a cigarette. One French fry equals one cigarette. It's a 1-to-1 toxicity level comparison. And the kinds of toxins, if you want to know what we're talking about, just to be technical here, that I'm not making this up, they're called alpha beta unsaturated aldehydes. And those aldehydes are the most reactive chemicals in cigarettes. They're responsible for the main toxicity of cigarettes, responsible for the fact that cigarettes promote inflammation, promote lung disease, promote disease in every organ that they touch, and promote cancer. Well, the same is true about seed oils. They promote inflammation and disease and cancer in every organ that they touch. And the thing is that cigarette smoke just comes into our lungs and goes through our circulatory system, and we pretty quickly eliminate most of it. But you can't say that about the seed oil toxins and the other kinds of damage that happens when we eat these seed oils, which is a whole other category that most people nobody has talked about this except for me in Dark Calories. And I'd like to kind of touch on that. I don't know if that was one of your questions, but it's so important that I do want to think now's a good time maybe to bring it up, the other end of it.
Please do. Yeah.
So one part of, we've talked about the fact that these oils contain toxins, right? The other part of it is they are depleted of antioxidants. And when we eat these oils, not only are we subjecting our body to toxins, the other part of it is we are depleting our bodies of antioxidants. And that's the key difference. So, to get into the chemistry, a lot of people think that somehow the factory destroys these polyunsaturated fatty acids and that they are somehow different. These polyunsaturated fatty acids are somehow different than what they were. And there's two major misunderstandings there that have completely confused the conversation. The first is that they are no longer polyunsaturated fatty acids. They've been oxidized. They are now toxins. So it's not like we have these weird versions of polyunsaturated fatty acids in our cell membranes. We have toxins that the body has to eliminate. And if it doesn't, then it depletes our antioxidants. And depleting our antioxidants changes everything about our body chemistry. And that is why you will have elevated ESR levels, right? That is why you will have chronic inflammation. That is why you will get degeneration. That is why seed oils accelerate the aging process. That's why I call them death in a bottle, because they contain toxins and they change our body chemistry by depleting our antioxidants. That second part, the depletion of antioxidants, is so essential to understanding their toxicity. And most of the influencers out there completely miss that point. And that's one of the reasons I had to write Dark Calories, to focus on these oils, because it's so different than what people expect and understand from something that, is in our food supply.
So counter that to extremely high polyphenol olive oil, extra virgin. I guess that gives you the antioxidants and gives you the fatty acids. I feel like seed oils are turbocharging the use of your antioxidants and also adding antioxidants and promoting it. So it's almost like a compounding effect versus olive oil that would do the exact opposite, I guess.
Yes, it sounds like you've understood that perfectly. And that's a great way to put it, that, it's a 1-2, the perfect 1-2 punch of promoting oxidative stress and depleting our bodies of the ability to control oxidative stress. And when we lose that ability, we open ourselves up to inflammation. And that understanding is the key to understanding why we're all getting sick, why we have chronic diseases, including obesity, including mental illnesses that are going through the roof in this country, and including even, things like birth defects, like things that will change the next generation permanently, right? That is happening largely because of the American Heart Association's promotion of seed oils as heart healthy, and the miseducation of the entire medical health system, and almost all of medical science has been corrupted by this. So it is a huge, huge topic that, frankly, we could not cover in 1 hour. I just had a documentary team here last week. They planned to do 1 day of filming and 1 day of B-roll, and they ended up doing 8 hours of interviews over 2 days. Wow. Because because there was just so much to cover. It is like the never-ending gobstopper of understanding of what is wrong with us. And just like, it is the most important topic. That's why I had to write a 5th book covering how seed oils harm us. And this doesn't cover the same stuff that I talked about in the other books.
So what I'm hearing is, if you're if you're a healthy person, and when you start getting a cold, you start taking vitamin C for the antioxidants, but you're still having the odd fry or two, or having seed oils in your food, you probably might want to revisit using seed oils.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's great to take vitamins in case your diet is deficient, but there's no amount of vitamins or supplements that can control the damage done by the fact that seed oils are in your diet today, and the fact that seed oils have been in your diet for years and have changed your body chemistry. And we have to recover from that. That is a process. You can cut the seed oils out today and begin that recovery process, but you're still not going to have normal metabolism until the recovery process is completed.
How long does that take, do you think? So if for instance, and I'm not saying because I very rarely ever have anything with seed oils in, but if I stopped today, how long do you think it would probably take roughly for my body to be clear of this nasty stuff?
Yeah, so this is going to have to be a guess, right? Because who has done studies on this, right? Nobody. So I can tell you my own experience is that, like, I started noticing changes immediately, partly because I was also eating healthier foods, including healthier fats, and I continued to notice little things getting better for years. Honestly, for years. And the changes to the brain function are the most profound. And because our brains were kind of wired around this dysfunctional metabolic state where they need sugar, and all kinds of weird relationships with food develop out of that, all kinds of dysfunction happening in our brain for years. Everybody talks about obesity and, diabetes and stuff like this, but the brain changes are so profound that you don't even realize how your brain was messed up until you recover from it, and that process can take years. Like, I my personality is different, right? Like I used to be somebody who did not like meeting new people because I thought I was an introvert. I thought I just was shy. And as a doctor, you have to meet new people every single day, right? And then at some point I noticed I'm looking forward to meeting people in a way I never was before. And I attribute that to brain energy. It's like part of it, you could say, well, it's just you're getting better at your job, you're blah, 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 all these other excuses. But I realized so many things had changed about the way my brain works, about my personality, about my mental stamina and my fundamental mood, like whether I was in a good mood looking forward to the day or dreading something. That is the real cherry on the cake here about what you get from changing your diet is you get so much more out of yourself.
Well, it's actually really funny you say that because I've got two points I really would love to share here. Now, bearing in mind, obviously our brain is 60% fat, there or thereabouts. And so if we're having really bad fats, then our brain chemistry is obviously not going to be right. And so it's actually fantastic that you point that out because I've noticed the same. And I've also noticed that, and this is before I was a biohacker, I went to Egypt and I was okay. I wasn't thriving, but I didn't realize I was sick at the time. And I was, started to bloat and various things going on like that. My diet wasn't great and whatnot. But anyway, I went to Egypt and I was out in the sun for 6 minutes and I burnt to a crisp. Literally, I was crying. It was so painful. I was so red and so inflamed from this sun. Fast forward 3 years, and I had reduced CDOS considerably and worked on my inflammation levels considerably. And now I don't get sunburn. Obviously, I still respect the sun. I'm not an idiot. I don't go out and burn to a crisp. But the point is I don't burn. I really don't. And I personally put that down to reducing CDOS and having plenty of healthy fats. And I've always put it down to, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I've always put it down to less inflammation in the body because I'm grounding more and less CDOS. What do you think?
100%. I mean, in Deep Nutrition in chapter 10, I have a pictograph of exactly how we get inflammation from the sun, much more inflammation from the sun than we should from a diet on seed oils. And it has to do with the fact that the fats that we eat end up in our body fat, which is located under our skin. So if we have these polyunsaturated fatty acids in very close to our skin cells, when they are struck, when the polyunsaturated fatty acids that are there in higher than normal amounts are struck by UV light, that initiates one of these oxidation reactions, that initiates free radical cascades, that initiates the inflammatory response and the redness. Right? So it starts as chemistry. It starts as a UV photon striking a molecule. And that chemical reaction is a free radical cascade and it's like a chain reaction. And that chain reaction triggers our body's inflammatory system, which brings more blood to the area. So it's like a response to damage. The inflammatory system is triggered by this oxidation of the seed oils under our skin.
So how can eliminating seed oils help with weight loss specifically?
Yeah, so eliminating seed oils is the only way to lose weight and keep it off. That has to do with what do they do to us. Turns out they alter the chemistry of our body fat. They alter our metabolism in ways that make us hungry more often than normal. Okay? So you can see that if you're hungry more often than normal, you're going to have a tough time keeping weight off. Even if you do on a crash diet and manage to lose it, you will have a very hard time keeping it off until you correct that metabolic problem. So it's not just eliminating seed oils, it's also correcting the metabolic problem. And we actually have a name for this metabolic problem that makes us hungry, believe it or not. It's called insulin resistance. And in chapter 3, I explain what I call the Dr. Cate energy model of insulin resistance, which I think is a revolutionary and important new way of understanding metabolic disease, because insulin resistance is not a disease of too much carbohydrate, although eating too much carbohydrate sure doesn't help. It's fundamentally a disease of altered energy production in our mitochondria due to the depletion of antioxidants and the change in the chemistry of our body fat. So we're talking about absolutely profound changes of human physiology that medical science is completely unaware of. Right, Tim? So no wonder they're debunking this. They're absolutely unaware of almost everything we've been talking about in this conversation. They have no clue. I didn't learn any of this in school, but it is all based in solid science that comes from the impeccable world of toxicology and chemistry. And when I say impeccable, I mean this science is solid. This is what textbooks are based on. This is the kind of thing that, designers that want to, in SpaceX, that want to put a rocket on the moon, they study this kind of chemistry so that they use the right materials, right? This is not theoretical, as a lot of people who are debunking this idea. They say, oh, it's just theoretical. It's chemistry. If you think chemistry is theoretical, you have no right to call yourself a scientist. And the same rules of chemistry that apply, on the space station apply in our food and in our bodies. The rules of chemistry are universal throughout the known universe, with the possible exception of black holes. So anybody who's saying that, this chemistry discussion of the seed oil chemistry is mechanistic and theoretical, they simply don't understand science, and they should be scolded for being basically, witch doctors, because they don't, that's what they're believing in.
It's funny because I heard a line once is, I don't know is the prerequisite to every advancement in science. And people that say, no, I know that this is wrong, like, for instance, people saying, no, I don't believe this. It's like, well, actually saying I don't know is okay because this person is an expert and they're not. So it's actually quite funny when I hear people saying, oh, that's not real. It's like, how well do you know this? And obviously that's why it's great to speak to you today. So we know that the obvious culprits are full of seed oils. It's pretty obvious, fast food, over-processed junk food, but some healthy foods are too. And I think, for instance, when I walk around Whole Foods in the UK, there's things like hummus, and it's pretty basic stuff, chickpeas and oil, and they use rapeseed oil or sunflower oil. And I'm just like, this is just like a bomb of inflammation. I mean, Whole Foods, do better, guys. This is just not good. But what other healthy foods are out there, do you think, that people should avoid or are typical culprits for this?
80% of the foods in the store with an ingredients label will contain these vegetable seed oils. So it's frozen meals, even supposedly healthy frozen meals, things that are supposedly, to help with diabetics, or to help with weight loss. They will contain the seed oils invariably. Mayonnaise, that's the most popular condiment in the United States is mayonnaise. And a lot of people make, all kinds of sandwiches with it. And it's almost always going to be made with in this country anyway, soy oil, canola oil is another very common one. But even worse than, I think, maybe you're going to touch on this later, but the most perhaps upsetting place where seed oils have seeped into our diets is in the fancy restaurants. I mean, one of the probably undisputed fanciest restaurant in America is in Napa Valley. It's the French Laundry, the chef Thomas Keller. When we lived there, we lived in Napa a couple of years ago, and my husband and I wrote a series of articles. He interviewed Thomas Keller, asked him what oil does he use, and he included canola oil. You can pay $600 for his food, and you're eating canola oil. That's what he puts in the fryers. That's what he puts in a lot of the sauces. And my husband said, that stuff, it's not really food. And he says, well, everything in moderation. That's the excuse, right? Also, it's cheaper.
It's quite funny when someone says everything in moderation. It's just like, well, what about your metal fillings? What about the salmon full of heavy metals and things like that? I'm wondering what his finances is like if he can't comprehend the whole compounding effect and things like that. It's like just a little bit, everything in moderation. Yeah, but it's everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Yeah, it's actually funny. There's a restaurant, there's quite a few restaurants by Gordon Ramsay, who's become quite a big star. And he's known, to be very particular about his ingredients and everything. And I ate at his bread kitchen in Battersea Power Station last week. And the fries were on the list. And I was just like, I quite fancy some fries tonight. I haven't had any carbs, blah, blah, blah. I've been a good boy, so I'm going to treat myself. When the waiter came over, being it's Gordon Ramsay, so one of, particular, I said, what oils are the fries cooked in? And he said, I'm going to go and find out. And I was just like, I'm 80% sure it's going to be the good stuff. He came back and said, sunflower oil. Just like, I'll leave it, thanks. And the only reason for someone to use those oils is to save money.
Yeah. Well, they come up with a bunch of excuses. They say higher smoke point. There's also neutral flavor. People are allergic to some foods. And then originally fries were cooked in tallow, but that was before we had so many vegans and vegetarians, wanting to avoid that stuff. So it's just like, it's the perfect solution for restaurants. And, I can't really get too upset at chefs about the chef's choices, honestly, because it's always a battle. Like, restaurants are some of the most unsuccessful businesses that anyone can start, because you're dealing with perishables, you're dealing with all kinds of things that can go wrong, and very, very narrow profit margins, right? So the problem really is the American Heart Association created this false idea that these oils are heart healthy, and the medical industry is miseducated, systematically miseducated, and has not woken up to that reality, that tragic reality.
Yet.
Right. Not fully yet. They're starting to. I think the exciting thing about the Make America Healthy movement is, that, at least doctors now who maybe never even thought about this or never took it seriously for a moment are going to have to take it seriously, because it's coming from, the higher authorities, perhaps even than the American Heart Association. The American Heart Association is the origin of this idea that the seed oils are healthy. And they are also the origin of another very dangerous idea that is related. And that is the idea that cholesterol causes heart disease. That is also a lie. I mean, it was a lie. Like, lie is a strong word. A lot of people think, oh, you can't say that. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I've studied the history. The American Heart Association had zero evidence to support the idea that cholesterol caused heart disease when they started saying that they did have evidence. They had no evidence.
So what is the good stuff? I mean, for the audience, like, what foods and oils, can we replace these crappy oils with?
Well, yeah, they are crappy. So I have a list of the delightful dozen in the third part of Dark Calories, but I'll give you my favorite 5, because that really does it for me. It does it for a lot of people. And so those are butter, olive oil, peanut oil, sesame oil, and coconut oil. Because they cover like the flavors that I like to get, that match what I like to cook with. I like, Asian cuisine. I like Indian cooking. I like Mexican. Other good fats would include things like lard and tallow. For a lot of cuisines in both Asia and South and Central America, lard from pigs was the main fat. And a lot of, like, the way I look at lard is lard or butter are like, most cultures use a lot of one or the other. Like, if you didn't have cows, you had pigs, basically. Because pigs can handle, like, a little bit hotter temperatures than a lot of cows. And certainly pigs wear their fat and preserve it until you're going to cook it. Whereas, cow milk had to be clarified into ghee. That's what they do in India, for it to be able to be what you would say shelf stable in that hot climate without refrigeration, right? So, we talk about like Asian cuisine as if it's somehow vegan or plant strong or vegetarian or whatever. But, in India, throughout India, they use ghee, and coconut, which is saturated fat. And throughout Asia, they use pork like crazy. Like, there's no country eats more pork than China, not just because there's so many people, but because per capita, it's their traditional fat. Pigs can grow in so many different climates.
I mean, they're quite low maintenance, aren't they? I mean, pigs are compared to sheep that will only eat grass on a hill somewhere. Pigs are eat anything and they can put up with most things. It's
and you don't have to milk them every day.
So finally, you have 5 supplements that you recommend to everyone, whether they're carnivore, keto, omnivore, vegan. What are your current 5 supplements?
So they are the vitamins and minerals that are absent from our food supply. Those are really the only things I think that we need to supplement. And I'm a minimalist, you probably noticed, when it comes to supplementation. So I recommend a multivitamin, because just to cover your bases, right? Like if you're doing carnivore, well, you're probably not getting a lot of vitamin C. You might not be getting some of the B vitamins either that are heavily in grains or unless you're eating liver, as a carnivore. But, and then on the other hand, if you're like a vegan, you're definitely almost not getting enough calcium. It's very difficult to get enough calcium without drinking milk, or doing any dairy. So, I recommend that multivitamin to kind of cover your bases of vitamins, and then magnesium because it's seems to be depleted from a lot of our soils, so I want to supplement with that, and zinc for similar reasons, and then also folic acid for a lot of people aren't getting enough, and then some optional ones are like depend on your diet, so maybe that's how you got to 5. So like if you don't do dairy, I would recommend a calcium supplement. If you don't do bone broth, I would recommend a bone broth supplement or collagen supplement. And then there's some other things. Actually, on my website, I have a page all about the supplements that I recommend that kind of walks you through how to tell what you need based on whether you do get a lot of dairy in your diet. I tell you how to figure out how much is enough dairy. Like I walk you through all of it. It's a very long page, but it does, also has links to products that I've picked out that are like the ones that I use myself.
Yes, I really like that you're a minimalist when it comes to supplementation. Actually, it's something that resonates with me. When I first got into biohacking or health optimization, whichever label, I was chucking, at one point, 40, 50 supplements down my throat. And when you think about what it does to your body, all the different changes in chemical reactions from doing these things. And I think, a lot of guys that get into the space, they start really high and then they realize actually it's about adjusting and tweaking and supplementing opposed to relying. And I find it always a shame when there's, let's say pro biohackers or leading biohackers that are known to stick 30, 40, 50 supplements down their throat every day. I just think you just don't really know what's going on biochemically with all of these things and interactions with each of them. I mean, if medicines interact, what happens with 50 or 60 supplements? So it's nice that you use the approach, food first, kind of like bone broth for all the minerals and nutrients and stuff like that. And and also magnesium and zinc, which again, so I feel very in alignment with that. I do play around with a few others, but they are to supplement. I think the one thing that I never, ever, 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 ever stop is actually phospholipids. It just resonates with me and my liver very well. So Dr. Cate Shanahan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I loved talking with you today. Thank you very, very much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Tim. This was a fun conversation. I enjoyed our time together.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Health Optimization Podcast, and I'm Tim Gray. If you've enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe for more. And don't miss the chance to join me and 35 speakers this April in Austin, Texas, for the Health Optimization Summit. Tickets are available from hosummit.com/Austin. I cannot wait to get the Paleo Tribe back together again. See you next time, and remember, let's spread the health.